This is something that happened a long time ago. It was when I was a high school student, and I believe I was a junior at the time. The high school that I went to was sort of small. It was nothing crazy, but there was maybe 100 kids in each grade. The school had a large cafeteria kind of in the front of the building, and then hallways connecting off of that. One day I was in the cafeteria eating lunch. I was sitting with a couple of my friends, and in the cafeteria they used to have these TVs. They were box TVs that were mounted on the walls in the top corners of the room. Most of the time they would just show school announcements in a sort of slideshow. Then every Friday they would play the school news show that one of the production classes made. So as I sat there at lunch with a few friends, I remember noticing that something different was playing on the TVs. It was not the normal announcement slideshow of basic school stuff. There was one guy sitting at a desk and talking. But the weird thing was that the guy in the desk was wearing a black ski mask, so I could not tell who he was. My friends and I quickly started paying attention to it and talked to each other about how strange this was. This was towards the end of lunch period, but I could see some of the other kids around the lunchroom start to notice. The masked man on the TV appeared to be in a classroom because the desk he was at was the kind that most of the classrooms at my school had. However, he was just sitting in front of a wall and I had no idea where he was because it was impossible to tell exactly what room. At first, I did not have the slightest clue as to who the guy was or why he was on the TVs in the lunchroom. I soon thought that it was probably something related to the school news, and it was maybe supposed to be funny or a joke. I kept waiting for them to cut to the normal student reporters or something. Except the news was not supposed to be on that day, and they never did cut to anybody else. The masked man was talking, but I could not hear a word he was saying, because the TV volumes were either really low or off entirely. The video continued on for about 5 minutes straight. Then it abruptly turned off. All the TVs in the room went completely black, as if they were turned off. By now, there were only 2 or 3 minutes left of lunch period. We went on with our conversations, and then the warning bell rang, signaling that the period was over. We got up, and everybody started clearing out of the room. My next class was a long ways from the lunchroom, but it was just study hall, so I took my time, not caring if I was late. My friends went in the opposite direction first, which is where the locker commons were, and I joined them. I'm not sure why, but our locker commons that year for my grade was way out of the way. It was at the far corner of the school that was such a long ways from the other end, and it was not really near many classrooms. So I went to the lockers, and then I began walking to my class. I was running late, and the hallways quickly became empty aside from me. I remember that as I was walking, I heard an announcement over the school intercom. It was an announcement that the school was having a lockdown. Instantly, I felt nervous because I don't think that we had ever had a lockdown before, at least not when I attended school there. I'd been a part of a drill once, but I wasn't really sure what I was supposed to do. I just started walking faster to try to make it to my classroom. As I was walking, I remember that I rounded a corner and I got into another hallway. This was one of the more narrow and quiet hallways in the school. I was using it as a shortcut to get to class faster. This hallway was near some of the tech classrooms, and the floors were carpet. When I got to that hallway, though, I saw somebody come around the corner far up ahead in front of me. It was a guy wearing a black ski mask, the same guy who had appeared on the TVs. I was very confused as to who this was, but I couldn't believe it that I saw him. But he was standing at the end of the hallway and now facing me. I kept walking, but now slowed down quite a bit. As I did, the guy at the end of the hallway didn't move. He just stood there looking at me. I had a bad feeling about it and would have to walk past him, but it appeared as though he was not going to get out of my way. I was still like 100 feet away though, but the guy had been standing there and not moving for like 10 seconds now. I knew that it would seem really weird if I just turned around and went the other way, but I didn't care anymore. I stopped, turned around, and just started walking back in the other direction. When I did, neither of us said anything, but after I had made it a few steps away, I heard him start walking. It was quiet because we were on carpet, but it was enough to let me know that I really had to get out of there, so I literally just started running. I went out of that hallway area and bolted out. I went down a few different hallways pretty much in a panic. Then I tracked back around and went a long and indirect route to my classroom. Eventually though, about 5 minutes later, I made it, and the masked man was nowhere in sight. In that time, I didn't see him at all. I was led in my classroom, and I was told that I was not supposed to be out in the hallways. I apologized and went to my seat. The lockdown lasted for about another hour. After it was lifted, I was sure that the masked guy was the cause of it. Within a few hours, word had spread, and I found out that he was in fact the cause. He turned out to be a student. I'm not sure why, but somehow he had gotten onto the TV and apparently he was making threats in the video. The kid didn't have any weapons on him or anything, and I heard he claimed afterwards that it was supposed to just be a prank. But it sure was scary, and I'm glad that I got away from him. He ended up getting expelled for that stunt, and we never had another lockdown for the rest of the time that I went to high school. The scariest moment of my high school career happened when I was a senior. It was the first semester and about a month or two in. During that semester, my schedule was mostly pretty easy. I had completed many of the required classes, and I was in a college-level class and another advanced one, but the rest of my schedule was just random electives that were super easy. In one of my hours, I was an assistant for the school offices. What I would do is just sit in the lobby area of the offices and do small tasks. My main task was delivering notes to students in various classrooms. I would receive the note with the teacher's room and walk there and deliver it. This is something that I enjoyed doing. Delivering notes was nice because it was cool to be the only one walking the empty hallways when class was in session. It would always be a little strange to walk into a classroom if the teacher was right in the middle of a lesson. I felt like I was interrupting, and then all the students would turn their heads towards me, which was strange. But other than that, I really enjoyed it. Anyways, this one day I was told to deliver a note like any other. I don't remember who it was for, and I didn't know the kid, and the teacher was somebody who I had never had either. The classroom was pretty far away from the offices, so I walked all the way there and delivered the note. It was probably like a 5-minute walk, and all the way at the other end of the school. So I was on my way back when I heard a lockdown announcement. I didn't know what it was for, but I really wasn't that concerned at first. We had a lockdown once before, and it ended up being nothing actually dangerous. But still, I knew I needed to get out of the hallways. When I was walking them, I hadn't heard or seen anyone. So I figured that the lockdown was probably not for something going on in the school. Eventually, I made it back to the school offices. However, when I tried the door, it was locked. This didn't surprise me much, being that it was lockdown protocol. So I just knocked on the door and figured that somebody would unlock it for me. But after I knocked, nothing happened. I waited for like 30 seconds and then knocked again, this time louder. That time I waited for over a minute. Nobody answered the door. I didn't know what was going on. They had to know I was out here. Could they not hear me or something? I didn't know. It seemed so loud when I knocked because the hallways were so quiet. I knocked one more time and this time called out, announcing that I needed to get in. Still, nobody answered. I was pretty frustrated, but also confused. Obviously, I knew that nobody was supposed to be out in the hallways during a lockdown, but what was I supposed to do? I tried to go back to the offices, so I started walking down the hallway. I didn't know where I was going, but I was just kind of wandering around, I guess. Really, I was just confused, and I realized that nobody was going to let me into the office, so I was frustrated as well. As I started to walk down the hallways again, I heard some footsteps not that far away. When I heard them, I felt happy. I figured that it was a faculty member, maybe a teacher, or maybe somebody who worked in the offices. I thought that I would find them and let them know that I needed to get back in the offices, and figured that they would let me back in. So I started walking towards the footsteps. When I got around a corner in the hallways, I saw someone. It was a man, but not someone who worked for the school. It was some sketchy-looking guy. He had longer stringy hair but was wearing a hat and also had a beard. Right when I saw him, I had a bad feeling. I no longer wanted to walk towards the footsteps. When he saw me, he didn't say anything or have any kind of expression on his face, but he did start to walk in my direction. I just turned around and started walking away, but tried to make it look natural, which it probably did not. I quickly turned a corner of a different hallway to be out of sight of the guy. When I could hear him drawing near, so I started running as quietly as I could. I went down that hallway until I saw another one, then I turned there. I walked down that hallway and still heard the guy walking, but could not see him anymore. I turned again, now into a back hallway area. When I was there, I was basically panicking. I thought about going to random classrooms, but given the fact that nobody answered the door for me before, I thought better of it. I was able to find a storage closet though and tried that door. Thankfully, it was not locked. I went inside and quickly but quietly shut the door. The closet was not that big, but did have some junk in it. I couldn't really see much though because the light was off and I wasn't going to turn it on. I just stood right inside and tried not to make a sound. For the first few seconds, I heard nothing. Then I thought that I could hear footsteps just barely. I couldn't hear well being inside there, but I only sort of heard the footsteps that one time. Then they pretty much stopped, and I couldn't quite tell where they were exactly. Things were really quiet in there for a long time. I didn't dare go back out into the hallways though. I stayed where I was and basically did not move. It felt like the longest time. Eventually, I went on my phone, but in that storage closet had no signal. I waited and waited. After what I would guess was over an hour, I finally heard that the lockdown was over. It was a great relief. I left the storage closet and went back out into the hallway. As soon as I did, the first person I saw was one of the women that worked in the offices. She got mad at me and said that I wasn't supposed to be out in the hallways. That really made me angry. I told her how I went to the door and I kept banging on it, but nobody answered. She claimed that nobody there heard anything. To this day, I don't know how that's possible. She told me I should have gone to a classroom. Well, that's easy for her to say. But anyways, I didn't get in any trouble or anything, and the lockdown was resolved. That man I saw was the cause of it. He had walked into the school at some point and was just wandering the hallways. Nobody knew what he wanted, but he refused to leave when questioned. Police got called, and they searched the school for him for almost an hour before he was found. In one of my first years teaching, something crazy happened. It was just my third year as a teacher. All of them I had spent at this high school that I do not work at anymore. Overall, I liked it though. Most of the students as well as the other teachers seemed nice, and they were pretty good. So, during the time of this story, I had my own classroom and I would teach 4 classes per day. In between class periods, sometimes I would stay in my classroom, and other times I would leave and come back. When I did, sometimes I would use the restroom, and other times I would stop by the teacher's lounge. But I would always keep my classroom door open for students that were arriving for my next hour. So one time, I just remember that I came back to my classroom, and out of nowhere there was a note left on the chair behind my desk. I picked it up and read it. The note was a simple piece of paper with the writing in pen that said, "I'm going to get you, watch your back." This seemed very threatening, and I didn't know what to make of it. Was this serious or some kind of a joke? I looked at the students that were currently in my room. It was just a few kids from my next class that were there early, and most of them I knew were good students and wouldn't do something like that. I held up the note and asked, "Did anybody here leave this note, or did you see who did?" Everybody just looked around and shook their head, so apparently nobody knew. Someone asked what it was, but I didn't want to say, so I just went on with class like normal. I figured I would ask the previous hour class the next day if they saw anything. I didn't report it because I wanted to see if I could figure it out for myself of who did it first. Plus, on the chance that it was a prank, even though that's messed up, I didn't want to get somebody suspended or anything. Unfortunately, I ended up forgetting. I got really busy with other things that I had to do, and it just slipped my mind. I forgot about it until the next day. That same class, at the same time of day as before, I went back into my classroom to find another note in the same spot. This time, it was worse. The note said a date and time, as well as my home address. When I saw it, I was more creeped out now because I didn't know how somebody would know where I lived. I asked my class again, and once more nobody knew or had seen who did it. This time I decided to report it. The date and time was for 2 nights later, and I think it was like 9:56 p.m. or some random time like that. So I taught my class, and afterwards I went to the office and reported what happened. When my next hour started, the school actually got locked down, which I did not expect. The lockdown lasted for about an hour. After the lockdown ended, the school day resumed as normal, but I got a call from the principal. He told me that they did not find who had done the note, but they thought they had some leads. I didn't really know what that meant, but I was told to be careful. The next day, I did not leave my classroom at all, in hopes of either catching who was writing the notes or stopping them from doing it. And I didn't see anything suspicious or get another note that day. The following day after that, the school day happened as normal and nothing strange happened. I also didn't leave my classroom that day. But that night was the date and time of the threatening note. To be frank, I did not think that anything would happen. I assumed it to just be a teenage prank or a harmless threat. I didn't know why anybody would write those things to me. As far as I was aware, most of the students liked me. I wasn't especially hard on anyone or strict, so I thought that maybe the kids were just pranking me. But still, just to be safe, I decided to go out that night. I hung out with a friend and was not home until after the threatening time. Probably an hour or so after that time, I returned back home. I was living in a small house that I was renting at the time. I was in a mostly quiet neighborhood that was about 10 minutes from the high school. When I got back home, I saw that my front window was smashed. I couldn't believe it. I didn't go inside but called the police. I was shocked that something had actually happened. I waited for the cops, and when they arrived, I told them the whole story. They looked around my house and found a guy hiding inside. He turned out to be a student at the high school, but he had never been in any of my classes. I have no idea why he did it. He got arrested for breaking in, and he was also expelled from the school. It was something that shocked me, and it's part of the reason that I changed schools. The place I work at now is nice, and there have not been any incidents. This happened when I was in high school about 10 years ago now. It was my junior year, and the first year that I was able to drive myself to and from school every day. So I would arrive just before classes started each morning. Usually I was never late. However, I would typically walk in just before classes started with about 30 seconds to spare, sometimes less. I'm not sure how I always timed it out so well, but somehow I did. Anyways, on this morning in particular, I did what I always did. I parked my car in the lot, entered through the southeast entrance, which was by the locker commons. Then I would walk up to the northeast wing of the school. That's where my first class of the day was, which was English. So when I entered the school, the warning bell had already sounded. There was approximately 2 minutes until classes started. So there were not that many students in the hallways anymore. As I kept walking, it was soon just me. When I got to the final wing where English was, I was making my way to class. There were doors at the end of this hallway that went outside. They were not that common for students to enter through, but occasionally they would. When I was walking, I saw these 3 guys walk through the doors to enter the school. Right away, I realized that they were all wearing masks, and there were these strange masks covering their entire heads. They were sort of like costume masks, but I couldn't tell what kind of character they were supposed to be. Other than that, the guys were wearing pretty normal clothes. I figured these were costumes because it was nearly Halloween. I think it was like the week of Halloween or maybe the week before. I kind of laughed and shook my head, thinking that they were just being funny for Halloween. We walked past each other in the hallway but didn't say anything. Then I got to my classroom and went inside. Classes started shortly after. I remember like 20 minutes into class, there was suddenly a lockdown. The teacher told everyone that the school is locked down and that it was not a drill. She turned off the lights, locked the door, and covered the windows. We had to leave our desks and sit on the floor in the back of the classroom. Some kids were quietly whispering and making jokes, and others seemed nervous. I had no idea what the lockdown was for. I just waited along with everybody else. The lockdown ended up lasting for almost an hour. Finally, it ended. The school day went on as normal after that. But when I found out what the lockdown was for, I was shocked. The same guys that wore masks that had passed me in the hallway were not students. They were grown men in their early 20s. After entering the school, they walked around the hallways and then split up, sticking their heads in the window of several classrooms. When a teacher tried to ask who they were, they ran away. They ended up hiding in separate places around the school. The police got called on them, and eventually they were all found. I didn't find out what their intentions were. Maybe it was all just supposed to be a joke after all, but it's sure a creepy thing to do. I'm a dad of 2, and this is something that happened when my daughter was a freshman in high school. She attended a pretty average-sized school. In her freshman year, she would ride the bus most of the time. Occasionally, with my work schedule, I was able to drive her to or from school sometimes, because my hours were a little bit all over the place. So one day, my daughter had a project for one of her classes that she forgot at home, sadly. I knew that the class she needed it for was one of the later periods of the day, so I decided to drive to the high school and drop it off for her because I didn't have to work that day. It was probably a couple of hours after the school day started when I drove there. After arriving at the school, I parked in the lot out front and then went in the main doors in the front of the school. They were the only 2 doors that were unlocked during the school day. When I arrived, there was a woman sitting in a small office who asked who I was and stuff. After showing her my ID and verifying who my daughter was, she let me in and said that I could give her the project. I wasn't really sure where to go when I got inside the school though. I didn't know where my daughter's locker was, and I didn't know where any of the classrooms were either. And class was in session, so all the hallways were completely empty. I thought about walking to whatever class she was in and embarrassing her, but I thought better of it. I just started walking around the hallways trying to look for maybe a teacher or something. Then I happened to see a student walking down the hallway. I took a chance and asked her if she happened to know my daughter. I couldn't believe it when she said yes and that they had a class together. I gave her the class project and asked if she could give it to my daughter, and she said yes. So at that point, I decided to go back and leave. As I was making my way back through the halls, I heard over the school speakers an announcement. I didn't hear the first part because the speakers were hard to understand, but I did hear the word lockdown. For some reason, I assumed that it was a drill. I don't recall if I thought I heard the word drill, or if for whatever reason that's just what I thought, but I was approaching some doors at that point and decided to just leave. So I walked to them and then went outside. These were not the same doors that I had entered the school through though. Like I said, I didn't really know my way around there, so I just started walking outside around the school to get back to my car. As I was doing this, I saw some random guy come walking in my direction. When he saw me, at first he walked right by. Then, as I walked through the parking lot towards my car, he must have turned around, because the next thing I knew, when I was almost at my car, I felt a tap on the shoulder. I turned around to see the same guy there. He asked if I could give him a ride. When I saw the guy, he gave me a bad feeling. Something about him seemed sketchy, so I said no. I told the guy I couldn't do it. He asked again. I told him that I really had to be going. He didn't say anything. I just got into my car and left, driving right away from him. After getting back home, my daughter texted me that the school was in a lockdown. I asked her why, and she didn't know. I decided to drive back to the school at that point. I was actually thinking that maybe I had caused the lockdown because maybe somebody saw me wandering the hallways. Also, if there was actual danger there, I wanted to go and see if I could pick up my daughter from school. However, when I got there, I saw several police cars out front. I was not allowed to go near the school. After a while, the lockdown ended and the school day resumed. I found out that it was caused by a suspicious man. Not me, but the guy who had asked me for a ride. Apparently, he had been inside the school and was talking to multiple students. He was reported and then left the school. He was asking me to be his getaway driver without me even realizing. I'm really glad that I didn't give him a ride. A crazy thing happened one time regarding a lockdown when I was in high school. It was during my junior year, I believe. So I remember that I was sitting in class one day. I don't remember a lot about the day prior to that, but I think that it had gone pretty normal. I do not recall anything strange or unusual happening. But when I was in class, all of a sudden there was a lockdown. The teacher stopped class, locked the doors, and turned out the lights. We were not told why there was a lockdown or what it was about. Some kids asked, but the teacher didn't say. So we all just had to sit there and wait in the dark. Some kids started talking, but we all kept our volumes of conversations pretty low. During this time, my cell phone started ringing. I looked and I did not recognize the number. Possibly from being bored during the lockdown, I decided to answer it. When I did, at first I heard nothing but static. My volume was also pretty low because I was in class, so it was hard to hear, but I had the phone up to my ear and I was listening. I asked who was calling me. Then I heard a man's voice. I don't remember his exact words, but he said something like, "I'm in your school and they're chasing me. I'm leaving now and I'm going to your house instead." I was so confused that I didn't even know what to say. After claiming he was going to my house, the phone hung up. I then put the phone down and it took me a minute to compute the conversation that I had just had. Finally, I started putting the pieces together. If this guy was in my school and they were chasing him, he was likely the reason that we were having a lockdown. But who was this guy and how did he get my number? And why did he say he was going to my house? Maybe he knew where I lived. I sat there thinking about the conversation for like 5 minutes. Finally, I decided to report it. I walked up to my teacher and told her what happened. She then called the principal's office. After that, I had to talk on the phone with someone from the principal's office briefly. Then the lockdown went for maybe 30 more minutes. When it was over, I didn't get a clear answer as to what was going on or anything. I just went on with the rest of the school day confused as can be. But I remember in my last class of the day, I got pulled out of it and told to go to the principal's office. Then they told me what happened. They said that a man was in the school who did not have any identification or reason for being there. He ran when questioned and the school was locked down. The police got called, but they couldn't find him in the building and thought that he had left. Then, after I reported the phone call, they went to my house. They found him hiding out on the edge of our property in the woods. We had a pretty big yard, and there was a lot of trees and woods back there. So the phone call that I got was from some creepy guy that was apparently stalking me or something. The crazy thing is I had no idea about the guy before this. I don't know how he got my number, how he knew where I lived, or anything. It really freaked me out when I realized that he probably followed me before without me noticing or something. I'm just glad that he was caught. This happened a few years ago. I played baseball in high school and college as well. After finishing college, my first job was working at a gym. I was also offered the position of head coach of the freshman baseball team for the nearby high school. Somebody at the gym was a teacher at the school and found out that I played baseball in college and stuff. The high school had 3 levels of baseball: the freshman team, the junior varsity team, and then varsity. The freshman team is really just about developing players because there's no playoffs for their season. The coaching staff for the freshman team is also very small, with me being the only coach. The junior varsity and varsity teams have more coaches. My first year doing it, my team was 18 players, obviously all freshmen. So one day I drove to the school to get ready for practice. School got let out at 2:45 p.m. and practice would be at 3 o'clock and we would meet in the locker room. I arrived at the school at about 2:15 or so. After going inside, I walked down the hallways towards the locker rooms. The high school was probably average size. The locker rooms were kind of at one end of the school and connected to the gyms and basketball courts. So I walked into the locker room and went into the very small office space in there. The locker room itself was very large. It was used for football, basketball, and baseball, and all the players from freshman to varsity used it, except for football where it was just varsity. So there were a ton of lockers in there and the space was decent. I was going over the practice plan and doing some preparations. During this time, I was the only person in there because school was obviously still in session. But the entire varsity coaching staff were also school teachers during the day, and I think the JV coaches there were as well. So after I was in there for maybe 15 or 20 minutes, I heard that there was a lockdown over the loudspeakers. This was strange, and I obviously wondered what the reason for it was, but there wasn't really anything that I could do. I just hoped that the lockdown would be over by the time practice was supposed to start. Overall, I just continued with my work. The doors to the locker room automatically locked, and they were pretty heavy-duty doors, so I wasn't very concerned. About 5 minutes later, though, I heard a loud knocking on the locker room door. There were 2 entrances to the locker room. One was the door connecting to the basketball gym, and the other was the door connecting to the hallway, and that's where the knocking was coming from. Obviously, I didn't know who it could be, but I thought that maybe it was another coach or possibly a player, so I decided to go over there and see. It took a few seconds to walk out of the office and over to the door, so when I got there and opened it, I didn't see anybody. I looked out into the hallway, but saw nothing. I was confused, but figured whoever had knocked had walked away, so I just closed the door and then went back into the locker room. After going back into the office, I heard the banging on the door one more time, but then it stopped. I didn't get up to look again. I thought that maybe this could be related to the lockdown. I had looked, but when I did, nobody was there, so at that point I just kept waiting. However, maybe 10 minutes later, I heard another sound. It was really weird because it wasn't a banging, but I heard an unknown sound coming from sort of above me but a ways away. I thought that maybe it was on the 2nd floor, but then I realized that the 2nd floor didn't cover this area of the school. The noise got louder and closer to me. Then I saw one of the ceiling tiles start to move about 30 feet away from me in the locker room. I quickly realized that someone was in the ceiling. The tile got removed and this random guy jumped down into the locker room. Immediately we looked at each other. He seemed surprised to see me, but I think that I was definitely more surprised to see him. How often do you see a random guy fall out of the ceiling? He got up and I got up as well. Neither of us said anything. Then the guy ran for the door connecting to the basketball gyms and left. I went to the office, took the phone there, and called the principal's office. I reported what happened and didn't expect them to believe me. But I found out that the guy who I had seen was a suspicious man in the school and he was the reason for the lockdown. The police were also looking for him. I was glad that he left the locker room. The lockdown lasted for another 10 minutes or so, then it ended. School resumed and then was let out shortly after. I found out later on that the man had wanted to hide in the locker room because he thought it was empty. He also knew that the doors locked. What I don't think he knew was that there was practice after school. He had entered a storage closet and climbed into the ceiling from there. Then he simply crawled next door to the locker room. I think the guy was crazy, but I'm glad they found him and that he didn't cause any harm. I used to work as a custodian at a high school. It was a fairly average-sized school. I was the overnight custodian and would be by myself for a majority of the shift. During the school days, there would generally be 2 or even 3 working at a time. That's because during the day there were more tasks to be done. Overnights, things still needed to be done, but I would be the only person in the building. Plus, many of the earlier tasks had been completed. So I would start at 10 p.m. and get off at 6 a.m., a true overnight shift. Most of the time I would be alone, but I didn't mind. I preferred it because I'm a bit of an introvert, and I found it to be more relaxing to work by myself most of the time. So on this one night, I was in the hallways in the north wing of the school. I was just mopping the floors, and out of nowhere I heard a lockdown announcement, which made no sense. I heard the beep come over the school intercom and then heard the announcement. The only explanation to me that made sense was that it was some kind of a mistake. I thought that I was the only person in the entire school, so how could there be a lockdown? And what would it even be for? Maybe the intercom system had malfunctioned or something. I thought that I would go over there as soon as I finished mopping the area that I was in. However, as I was finishing, I heard it again for a second time. Now I was really thinking something must be wrong over there. The intercom system was controlled from the main offices of the school. I stopped mopping and then started to walk over there. It was a ways away, but as I was walking in that direction, I did not hear anything else, until I got much closer. As I approached the offices, I heard footsteps. They were not within my sight and kind of far away. I couldn't tell exactly where they were coming from. I also didn't know where they were going, but they were not that close to me. I thought that maybe somebody was in the school that I didn't know about, perhaps another faculty member. However, when I reached the offices, all the lights were off and everything was quiet. I went inside and turned on the lights. Everything seemed fine. Personally, I didn't really know much about how the intercom worked. That wasn't really my department, but nothing seemed out of place or broken. Nothing seemed like it had been messed with either. And I hadn't heard a lockdown announcement in a while now. So by this point, I was very confused. Then I heard the footsteps again, still really far away. In my mind at the moment, I felt that the footsteps had to be related to the lockdown announcement. Maybe somebody was here working on it without my knowledge. I was supposed to know if anybody else would be working in the school overnight, but I wasn't told anything. I mean, there were a few times when a sports game or something ran late, or a team arrived back late from an away game. Then sometimes people would linger around until after midnight, but never this late, and I had not seen anybody else. There were also no late sports games or events that night. So I called out asking if anybody was there. I yelled pretty loud, but not in an angry tone or anything. I didn't hear anything in response. However, I did hear the footsteps seemingly going farther away. I walked in that direction for a while. I couldn't tell exactly where they were coming from though. I'm not going to lie, I was feeling creeped out. However, I was really curious as to who was in the school. After walking around the school for like 10 minutes, I didn't hear or see anything else. I turned around and went back to where I originally was. When I got back to my mop, there was suddenly another announcement. It was a beep of the intercom, followed by an announcement that the lockdown was now over. This creeped me out so much that I literally took off running for the offices. When I got there, I didn't see anybody. The lights were still off and the doors were still closed and locked. I went in and looked around anyways. There was nothing in there, and when I got out, I walked up and down a bunch of random hallways, calling out, demanding to know if anybody was there. But I got no response, and I didn't see or hear anybody at all. I didn't hear any more footsteps or anything. I did the rest of my tasks that night a little bit on edge and feeling nervous of what could happen. But there were no more lockdown announcements or footsteps. When the next custodians arrived at about 5:30 a.m., I told them of what happened. We searched the entire school up and down, but didn't see anyone or find any trace of anyone either. They said they would brief the principal and staff of what happened overnight for me because I left at 6 a.m. After that night, I never heard anything more of it other than that nobody was ever located. and nothing else like that ever happened again in my time working there. This is still something that makes me wonder. Somebody was definitely in the school that night. I heard the footsteps. But why was there a lockdown announcement? I don't know. It was really weird. I used to work part-time as a substitute teacher. I really liked it because it was pretty easy. I mostly just had to take attendance and give the class a task to do or else put on a movie or something like that. Sure, I was always nervous that I might get a super crazy class of kids, but that never really happened. So one day, I was asked to come in and sub for just 1 hour. It was the final hour of the school day and the teacher was leaving early. So I would just be there for the final hour of the day, really easy, or so I thought. I arrived at the school about midway through the second to last hour of the day. I arrived at the teacher's room, who did not have class that hour, so the room was unlocked for me but empty. The teacher had left already, so I had some time to get into the room and wait for the next class period. A short while after I got into the room, maybe 10 minutes, I heard an announcement come over the school intercom. It said that there was a lockdown and that it was not a drill. I obviously had no clue why, but I decided to follow the procedures. So I went over to the door, locked it, and turned out the lights. I was honestly happy that no students were in my classroom yet. I figured that I would just sit and wait it out and hopefully it was nothing bad. I didn't get any message or indication of what the lockdown was about, so I just sat in the room and it was pretty much complete silence. After about 10 seconds though, the silence was broken when I heard somebody trying to open the classroom door. It startled me and I shot up in my seat. I looked over to the small window in the door, which I had forgot to cover. It was one of those small windows that's tall but narrow. I saw a woman standing there outside the door. Right when I looked over at her, she quickly disappeared. I thought that she might be another teacher, so I got up and started to walk over to the door. The way that she quickly moved away from the door when seeing me, though, seemed a little bit odd. Still, I walked over there anyways. I opened the door to the classroom, and I saw the woman standing about 10 feet away. She looked back at me and quickly said hi to me and asked if I was a substitute. I said yes and asked if she needed something. She told me that she was looking for the teacher who's normally there. I told her that she was gone for the day and that I was subbing for her final hour. I also asked her if she knew why there was a lockdown. She said that she didn't know, but she had to get going. Then she quickly walked away. Something about her seemed a little off, but I just went back to the classroom and went inside. I sat back down at the desk and continued to wait out the lockdown. About 10 minutes later, I heard someone try to open the door again. I looked over, but this time could not see anybody in the window. I got up and walked over to the door again. I opened it, but this time there was nobody in the hallway. I was very confused, but just sat back down at the desk once again. The lockdown lasted for about another 30 minutes and then was finally over. After that, the class that I was subbing for came in for the final class of the day. During the class, I found out about the lockdown because the students were talking about it. I'm not sure how they found out, but what I heard shocked me. They said some lady had entered the school and tried to ask students to leave with her. She got reported because nobody knew who she was or why she was there, and they thought that she was acting really weird. Then, when a staff member approached her, she pepper sprayed him. It was the same woman who I had spoke to in the hallway. She ended up being found eventually, but she had tried to enter the classroom that I was in. I'm not sure why. The thing that creeps me out the most, though, is how she went back to my classroom again after the first time. This happened back when I was in high school. I was a senior at the time. I would drive to and from school every day. I went to a pretty large high school. There were like 500 kids in every grade, and so I would have to park super far away. There was this parking lot near the school and then another lot that was a bit of a walk. It was fine though because there was a nice path through campus that had some trees and wildlife around it. So one day I slept in and was late to school. This rarely happened, but being a senior I was always up late and having to drive myself to school and I couldn't rely on the bus. So I drove to school and parked in my parking lot far away. I was hurrying as fast as I could and I left my car and started walking down the path. School had already started like 5 or 10 minutes ago, so I was late but I didn't want to miss very much. Not long into the walk though, I checked my phone to see the time. When I did, I saw a text from one of my best friends. He said that there was a lockdown in the school going on and he didn't know what it was for. When I saw this, I stopped in my tracks and then turned around. I didn't want to go to the school if there was a lockdown going on. Plus, I probably wouldn't even be let in. I hoped that everything was okay, and I turned around and walked back to my car. I got in and sat inside my car and decided to wait there until the lockdown was over. If it took too long, I would just drive back home to my parents' house. When I got back to the car, I asked my friend what the lockdown was for through text. He said that he didn't know, but they were just sitting in class and not doing anything. So I got in my car and sat there, and nobody else was around. I waited in my car for quite a while. I was getting bored, but quickly that changed. When I was sitting there in my car still, I saw this guy come running down the path towards the parking lot, and it was not a student, but a grown man. I didn't recognize him. The man was sprinting, and when he got to the parking lot, he started walking. The guy began going in between cars, in and out of my view. I just kept watching him, not really thinking much, but just wondering what he was doing. Eventually, the guy started getting closer to my car. Then he saw me. When this happened, the guy started quickly walking over to my car. He went straight for my driver's window and knocked on it. I rolled it down just a crack, I'm not sure why. Looking back, I should have just drove away. I don't know what I was thinking, but that's what I did. The man said that he needed a ride. He wasn't even asking for a ride, but more so just demanding one, because right after he said that he needed a ride, he moved back and tried opening the driver's side backseat door to my car. Thank God it was locked. I was still confused and surprised by what was going on. I didn't know who this guy was or where he had come from. He didn't say why he needed a ride or anything. Finally, I spoke. I asked the guy why he wanted me to give him a ride. He said that he didn't have time to explain and kept trying the door handle. He quickly grew frustrated and started banging on my window and telling me to hurry up, and he almost pressured me into it. I was this close to unlocking the door and giving him a ride, but thankfully I thought better of it. I said that I could not, and then I started my engine and backed up. He tried to get in front of my car and block me in, but I was able to go around him. Then I quickly drove away and went back home. I got back, and within like 30 minutes I found out that the lockdown was over, but I told my parents what happened and they called the school. I ended up finding out that the guy who tried getting into my car was the cause for the lockdown. He entered the school and was not supposed to be there. I got excused from the rest of the day of classes. That was the craziest thing that happened to me in my high school career.